Welcome to Script to Screen's Talks podcast. Script to Screen is a charitable organisation dedicated to developing the craft and culture of storytelling for the screen in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This talk series brings the creative community together to hear inspirational speakers talk about their creative process, craft, philosophy, or the creative landscape. We are pleased to share with you Adapting Real Life for the Screen, recorded at a live Auckland talk in March 2023. Producer Karin Williams talks to three outstanding writer-directors, Welby Ings, Matthew J. Saville, and Paula Whetu Jones. They discuss their experience weaving screen stories from truth, memory, and social history while working on feature films Punch, Whina and Juniper.
Me takimata, thank you very much and welcome everybody. How's everyone doing? Good? Thanks for coming out on a Wednesday night. It's always really great to see a full house and it's great to be back in real life instead of on Zoom, which really sucked. So thanks for being here, and I am really honoured and thrilled to be here with these amazing people. I'm not going to go into detail about their bios because you can read them on the website and most of you probably know who they are. But I do know that each one of these guys had a long and hard battle because I've sort of peeked around the other side, on the inside, you know, behind the camera, behind the screens. And they all worked long and hard to get their visions to the screen. So very excited to welcome Welby, Matt and Paula. Please, for my te paki. To start off with, I'd like to just check in with you guys before we talk about the adaptation process. You all had films that were released in the last couple of years, 3 amazing films that are now part of the New Zealand film canon, and they're all in distribution and release. So I want to check in with you and find out what's going on with your projects right now, because Welby's, you've got an American release in theatres going on and had an amazing review in the New York Times. So can you just let us briefly know what's happening with Punch?
So I don't want to sound like a wanker, but we're all proud mums and dads, really. So it's it got the critics' pick in the New York Times, and on the same day I got 2 emails, one which told me I should be lined up against a wall and shot in the face. So it's the other side of it. But the film actually had a very short run in New Zealand, and then it was in Tallinn, and then like all my films, even though I love this country dearly, they all do better overseas, and I don't understand the reason for that. It doesn't stop me loving this country, and I still believe that our audiences are more sophisticated than we give them credit for. So that's basically what's happened to Punch. So it's in cinemas, I think, at the moment there, and it's just been released on all these platforms. But I don't have a TV, and I don't have radio, so I don't know what they are. I don't know what they're called, but apparently, and it was on the back seat of Air New Zealand because people were flying and going. I watched it while eating plastic food. So that's it.
Awesome. I do think it is available on TVOD, transactional video, on places like Apple TV. You can rent it. So you can see Punch if you haven't seen it already. I don't think it's on a streaming platform yet, according to Flix, right? He doesn't know because he got a TV. Awesome. Congratulations, Welby. It's very exciting. Isn't that classic, though? Ignored and spurned in your own homeland and then, top pick from the New York Times.
Yeah.
Matt, Juniper has done its theatrical run. Is that true? Is it screening anywhere at the moment?
I think it's in it's screening in the US right now on release. So we had a run there, and then it's opening digitally, but there's still a few more festivals to go and things like that. Right. And it's had a nice theatrical release around Europe and things, and obviously people really love Charlotte Ramblings, so that's really opened doors for us in those sort of Scandinavian countries and those kind of places as well, which has been great.
Yeah. Congratulations, because, of course, the common wisdom these days is that nothing goes to theatres, it goes straight to streamers. But it's not true. People are still going to movie theatres.
We had a really boutique sales agent, and they really pushed theatrical release. So they fought for it to be released all over the place and pushed for that, really, really hard. That was kind of the nice thing about having a small sales agent.
Great. Congratulations. Paula, Whina, has it finished its festival and theatre run? I see it's on TVNZ Plus.
Yeah. So actually I don't know. I do know that schools are now teaching it as part of the curriculum, English curriculum. It's on TVNZ on demand, and you can buy it. I'm not sure about the festival releases.
But it had a great theatrical run.
Yeah.
And it cracked the mythical $1 million at the New Zealand box office.
Yeah, we had a really successful run in New Zealand, and we got lots of really good reviews from home. Oh, we're the opposite of you, Welby. I don't think it's doing that well overseas, but we did really well at home.
Great. Thank you, guys. And as they were saying earlier, they wrote these things decades ago and released them and are all onto new projects. So, in the life of a film, when the audience is seeing it, the filmmaker has moved on, but all 3 films doing really well. So we have 2 kind of really different kinds of films here based on real life, if you will. We have Whina, which is obviously the story of a New Zealand icon, very, very public figure. And then we have 2 films. I was actually reflecting on how similar in some ways your films are, because they're about, they have young male protagonists who are sort of coming of age in New Zealand and rural or small town New Zealand. So quite different considerations about adaptation. But I'd like to start with Paula. What were the challenges for you and your team in telling the life story of such an icon? We have a family, a hapu, an iwi, and then the whole rest of the country that thinks that she's their mother as well. So what were the big challenges for you in that adaptation?
Whānau hapu iwi was a big challenge, and Matthew Metcalf did a lot of the hard graft. He spent 9 years trying to get Henirangi's and Joseph's permission and trust. And then, of course, because everybody knew Whina, or a lot of people knew Whina, there was that to sort of to consider as well. And her life she was 98 when she died, so what do we actually put in the film? And it was decided that we would make it a love story. So it went through a lot of transitions before we landed on the script, and a lot of people involved. But yeah, I think, so the whānau were on board, and of course we went to Pangaru and spent lots of time with them. And they were involved right from the beginning, right to the end. Half of Pangaru is in the film, all the whānau are in the film, and every step of the way they had to sign off. So the probably our own people were the biggest hurdle for us as filmmakers. That's it.
And so the decision was made to focus on the love story, but it's actually quite a scandalous love story in some ways, because she cheated on the husband with this handsome guy. So did you get any backlash about that from family or anybody else?
No, I think because of the way we treated it, because it's a real story. Like, she's human and she has flaws, and so that was part of our storytelling, is we weren't going to make her into a character that nobody could believe, because, I mean, she had her deflectors, she had lots of them, but we told the story, the good and the bad, and her heartbreak and her life and what she achieved. And I mean, she achieved so much more than we could actually put on screen. But yeah, the love story was nice. It made people were able to relate to her mistakes and her dogged determination, to do what she thought was right, even if it went against, the church or her iwi, her whānau. Yeah, so it was how we treated the scandal that made it okay. Like, the big thing was we didn't want people to not like Whina, because the film would have been over. So it was just the way we treated it. And we thought we did a good job in doing that, because it was quite hard. She had an affair while her husband was dying of cancer. How do we make that sort of palatable? But yeah.
And I also wanted to ask you about the writing process. You came on as a writer fairly late in the process. There were already drafts that had been approved.
Yeah.
What did you bring as a Māori woman, as wahine Māori writer, to the process and to that final script?
A Māori woman. That's what I brought to the process. That's it, And I guess being a mum and struggling and being an outsider, just being a Māori woman is what I brought to the process, and a commitment and a loyalty to Whina and her family that I wasn't going to budge on certain things, and
Awesome. Congratulations. A beautiful film, and I think, as you say, really embraced by New Zealanders and all New Zealanders of all stripes. So great. So with Matt and Welby, your films are far more personal and they're drawing from real life. So I wanted to start with you, Welby. At what point does fiction diverge from fact? You've said that the film is drawing from your experiences, growing up in a small town in Aotearoa. At what point did the script writing move away from what actually happened?
So, in truth, the core of the film was a promise to my partner who died of AIDS, and he was from a boxing family. And when he died, I couldn't care for him at home anymore, and we went to the hospice. And he didn't want his father to know that he was dying. He didn't want his father to know he had AIDS. And his father had trained him ruthlessly as a boxer, and he'd walked away from it. He held the national title in the triple jump in New Zealand. And his dad came to see him, and Kevin wouldn't let him in, wouldn't allow him into the room. And in the end, he did come into the room, and he sat by the bed, and he couldn't touch him. And for 20 minutes he sat there, and then he was crying, and he left. And I thought, stories of men and their fathers, they're complex things. And I said to Kevin, someday I'll tell the story where this doesn't end this way, where the love between a father and a son can be looked at in a really deep way, and it may not have to end. Like, I'm not a redemption narrative guy, so I don't like Disney endings. So clearly it wasn't going to have a Disney ending. What a surprise, yeah. So his name is the last name on the scroll at the end. I dedicated it to him. And so it was a promise to somebody I loved. But then the other bits that were woven into it was the first guy I fell in love with when I was at school. We didn't have the word takotapui then, but that was where I first understood the idea of beautiful. But I was shit scared because he was out in Te Awamutu in the 1970s. And that's not an easy thing to be. I got dragged out for feeling up someone in the back of the German class, but that was different. Sorry, there's a little more information than you really wanted to know. He doesn't want anyone to know anymore. But so what I did with the film is what I tend to do with my stuff is I'll weave 2 or 3 narratives together and never name somebody for who they are. And then, so Kevin, my mate, his younger brother, who used to come and stay with us, is a boxing coach, and he trained the boxers in the film. So that's why I was so interested. So I also have this thing of trying to make sure that there's room for whānau, for people whose stories are there, that they can come in and be in the body of a work which I define as fictional, but having its roots in ordinary small stories. And so I'm the same thing. So families were involved, including my own, because my mum's in there and a sister. And if you have a look at the credits, you go, Ings. God, that must be the whole span of them. So does that answer your question?
Yeah. And did you have to worry about the father of your partner as he passed, or that family? Like, were you thinking, like, God, they're going to see this or find out about it and be horrified?
I had to worry about him because he had passed.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't, there was, like when I think when I make a story, there's a power play. I have taken power from people because I'm in control of a narrative and editing it that they aren't, and it's their life. And so with people who are alive, you can talk, but people who have passed, you can't. And so that carried a a lot of weight. But that's why, not the only reason, but the father is actually, all the characters are flawed, like you were saying, because I think flawed characters are really interesting, but we love them. And that's why I conceived the thing as a love story between a father and a son and a takotapui. So it was a love story between men. And within that broad frame, knowing that we are flawed, then I thought that was how I could bring the two things together. I don't think I could create an absolute villain from someone who wouldn't be there to defend themselves.
And your family were all thrilled and happy to be in it and supporting you all the way?
Well, Theatre and Te Awamutu wasn't going to screen it. Bless them. They did 2 screenings. Bless them. So I'm lucky, like I was just saying before, I can't see what's in your backpack, but all of us have families and people we love. And I'm the son of a pukeatu, a shearing contractor. I loved my dad, but he's passed. But I got opportunities in the world to tell stories, and so I try to open doors within those for the family to come in and be part of them, so they can see the manufacture of something that's fictional. They know it's not real because they see it's the artifice behind it. And that's my way of paying them back, giving back to them for what they gave to me to enable me to have the skill.
And you created a fictional town, because I looked it up. I'm like, where is this?
I don't know if you know.
Pirao? And then I'm thinking,
so anyone who knows what Pirao means, it means not a very good smell. So Pirao is a fictional town. It was based on Te Awamutu, and I did explain to them. I even took the map of the main street to make the layout for the town. So, and I mapped it onto just to show them how inspirational the town had been. So there was a bit of a responsibility there, but I went down because the town is a character, and because although there were moments of beauty in it, it's not a great place to live. Mm-hmm. And so I said to them, I'm happy to do a special screening. You can make the money for whatever charity you want in the town, but talk about the inspiration of Te Awamutu. So characters like the doctor who knows the father and the son and the family, the small town policeman, they are wonderful characters from small town. But the other parts are not good. And so I felt I had a responsibility to go back to something that had a world that had shaped that, and be honest and lay it out there. And to, I don't know if you've got this with your work. I just try to do the best I can with something, especially if it's difficult. I try and bring my best skill to it, so I don't treat the thing half-assed. And if that skill's not good enough, then that's my failing for not being skilled enough to tell the difficult story. But I unashamedly try to do a really, really good job.
Awesome. And did do a good job, according to the New York Times. Yeah. Vindication, as you say. So, Matt, you also had drawn on your own personal story, and I understand it's actually quite close to, you actually did have a grandmother who broke a leg and came to live with you and drank cartons of gin.
I did.
So where did fiction or truth turn into fiction?
I suppose it was defining a kind of narrative, like my grandmother came to live with us for the last part of her life, and she'd broken her leg, and she had this like literally when I first met her, she was like, come in. I didn't know her really. So she was like, come in, turn around, dress like shit, buy you some clothes and wear those from now on. That's the kind of person she was. And she did do things like, she drank half a bottle of gin or a bottle of gin a day, and she watered it down, and she just topped herself up. That was who she was. And on top of that, she was incredibly smart. She spoke the truth, and she just said what she thought, and she was charming and intelligent, and she sort of I suppose she just dominated our house for 6 months, and then I had the privilege of being with her and holding her hand as she passed, which was, a moment. And so that her character just felt like, we'd always talked about her, and she was this presence. And I felt like I wanted to do something about that character. And then I also didn't want it to be like autobiographical. I wanted to find something else. So I sort of took the best, I took her and mixed her with other women and created something new. And I took myself, I suppose, in some ways, and created someone new, but based on people I knew and with my grandmother's name was Heather, but we called her Mocky. The character's called Ruth. And I took, and she had been in the Spanish Civil War, so she had been secreted out of there by the British Secret Service. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. What if she had stayed a bit longer and she'd been a war journalist? And then I was researching a woman like Martha Gellhorn or Lee Miller, and I kind of looked at all of these cool women who had something similar to my grandmother and created this hybrid. And I think the key thing was in sort of understanding her, and it was something that I think we all have, is like I found this photo, and it's in the film. I found this photo of my grandmother once when I was, like 14 or something, and I found a photo of a hot woman in a bikini, and I was like, dude, who's this, And he's like, that's your grandma, and I was like, oh, of course, because I know her at this older age, and that's how I see her, but she was this other person, and that kind of keyed me into this sort of idea. And she would say things like, I felt 18 all my life, but now I'm old. Sorry, I do get a bit choky when I talk about these things. She would say, I'm 80 now, and I felt 18 all my life until now. Now I can feel my bones creaking. And she would say things like that, but it was about this woman who did feel 18 all her life, and hence trying to find a woman like Charlotte Rampling to pay her, to play her, sorry. So it came from taking characters and then thinking, and I started writing a coming-of-age story. And then I realized, well, I'm not writing a coming-of-age story, actually. I'm writing a romance. And it's a romance, a platonic romance between this 17-year-old boy and his alcoholic grandma. And there's like this transfer of, she helps him to live and he helps her to die. And I suppose that it was kind of finding that, which is that's not my story, but that is a universal story, and that kind of helped me take from I suppose it's like having the family background. It's like that optioning the novel, you know what I mean? I've got access to all these things, but it isn't 100% real, but it is, I did hold my grandma's hand when she passed, but I didn't take her up the top of a hill, you know what I mean? So it's like finding that and then finding maybe a cinematic universal truth, I guess, if that makes sense. Yeah.
And did you have to worry about sort of outing your family or having people go, oh, Matt's father must be an emotionally repressed Englishman? What were your considerations around sort of family dynamics, family characters, family stories?
Everyone knew it was a fiction, and so no one feels outed by that film, and my family, they love it. They're very proud of it. So I think for everyone in my family, except for one auntie that may have defriended me on Facebook, but I'm not 100%. I'm not 100% if it's the film, because she defriended a few other people as well. But everyone's very proud, and we all celebrate Mocky, And so I think we all see it as like this woman who lived this amazing life and she inspired this thing. We know it's not her, but for us it's like a celebration of her, if that makes sense.
So it sounds like both sets of families have a pretty clear idea of where the line is between truth and fiction, and you as writers also.
Yeah, and totally. And I mean, it's kind of, there's things in there that are real, like my grandmother did throw a carving knife at my father once when she was drunk, and it did stick in a knot of wood above the door, and that was like a family story, and it was like, the character that is Robert says that at the end, and it's kind of like, You know, it's a nice piece of truth, but it isn't Robert's truth. And my mum never passed away, you know. So it's like you grab onto these little pieces of truth and they kind of help ground it, but everyone knows it's a fiction, you know.
I'd like to talk about the process of consent and consultation. So for you, Paula, and for that project, I understand that was pretty massive, and you'd mentioned that it took years and there were a lot of people to get on board. So what was that like, negotiating, you know, all of those family dynamics, you know, whānau, hapu?
For me, because I have a doco background, this is not new. This is what we have to do. But I just wanted to touch on, sorry, just before I forget, we had to do the same thing about creating Whina as a young woman when no one remembered her as a young woman. So we just had to pull pieces from, you know, photos and things that have been written about her. And her as an older woman being, you know, your grandma saying that she's always felt 18. We kind of thought that she'd be the same because she didn't really change the way she was. She just got slower. So, yeah, and the biggest sort of, the most wonderful thing happened when because of course the grandchildren never met their grandfather. And so we had Irene Cooper, who's the little girl in the photo, as our EP, and she was on set all the time. And she's like, "Oh my God, my granddad's so hot," you know. She's like, "Oh my God." But she said to, you know, she didn't realise her grandmother and her grandfather were like that, and we're like, well, we just created that from what we, you know, how we read about her and people talked about her and her talking, her interviews and that. So we created this person that the young people didn't know but were totally in love with and totally knew, which we thought was pretty cool. But yeah, permissions and consents for me, I won't even touch anything if people don't want us to do it. But there was a lot of, you know, we didn't talk about it. There was a lot of contention around the permissions. But for us, her son and her daughter and her children said yes, that's all that matters. And as long as they were happy with what we were doing, we weren't really concerned about anybody else because we were telling their mother's story or their grandmother's story. We weren't telling the politics or, you know, we weren't sort of looking at race relations. We weren't doing any of that. We were telling her story from her whānau's words. And, you know, even the saucy bits, they didn't even bat an eyelid because that was their mum or that was their grandma. So, but from a doco background, no point in trying to do anything, trying to talk to people who don't want to be talked to. And so the consent process was a lot of mussel fritters, a lot of fry bread, a lot of time, a lot of cup of teas, a lot of time up north. But, you know, it was such an amazing privilege to be allowed into the community. Like the church was the church that her dad built. Like, for instance, that was the church in Pangaru. And, you know, the school was involved and the locals in the church were all locals from Pangaru. So, I mean, everybody had ownership over it, which was, you know, of course not everybody liked it, but everybody saw someone or something in that film that they could relate to. And having so many, and, you know, one of my friends said to me, "Oh, she's so bougie, you know, Whina's so bougie." And I'm like, look at the photos. Look at the photos back in the day. They were totally bougie, you know. And she had money, like she worked and she had money. And so that was another thing that was really important for me to represent the people of the era and area in the right way. You know, I have people, because in the 50s scene, you know, they hang out nappies, and I'm like, oh, no. They got to hang them out right, and they got to be white. It doesn't matter how poor people were in the 50s. You don't hang out dirty stuff, you know, and so I'd make them, take them and hang them out properly again, because they had a pride in themselves, even though they were poor. And even in the 50s, you know, when the slums were all around, people didn't know about the slums in Ponson being grey land. It was insane just how much people didn't know. But Yeah, so the consents for the photos, the consents for everything, the consents for using the doco footage of the actual crossing. So Leon Nabi, who was our DP, actually filmed that footage. In 1975, he was the camera operator. Which is funny. He was going, well, that didn't happen, and that didn't happen. I'm like, yeah, but we know that she didn't walk from the top of the north. She was 80, but but so little things like that made it special. But we everything was consented, everything.
And in terms of public figures like Apirana Ngata, did you have to do consent with whānau on that, or is it a public figure so you can portray him?
He's a public figure, and because of the fact that he, the land scheme it's public knowledge. But no, we hit gold with Matiu on that because he walked in and he was doing some theatre show and he had a moustache, and we're like, oh my God, that's Oppie, and he's from the area. That's another thing that we took into consideration, and he was fantastic. The Māori Battalion boys were all from Northland, or a lot of them were from the Northland. So, so consent, absolutely 100%. You need to have it. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother trying to tell stories about people if you don't have the consent around it or the right consents.
Yeah. For you, Matt, did you have to, or did you feel you needed to have consent or to consult with any of the whānau about portrayals of your characters?
I didn't know. I mean, it was. It was a kind of. It is a fiction, like the stories and the relationship I have with my folks. So really, I mean, it's my dad would be the major person. It's his mother, and he was, he thought it was cool to be writing something based on her. But it is I suppose it's that difference between. I think maybe there was like a draft years ago, and I showed him, and there was something in it that he didn't like, or something, but he had read it or something like that. But they were pretty in. They knew about the script and they knew everything, and it was never because it's not my grandmother, it's a made up thing, and it's these characters, they're based on reality but they're not real people. It wasn't really a thing. I think they just wanted to see it successful, and the spirit of it, like I said, the spirit of it is a celebration of her.
So that it sounds like they were pretty clear about what's fictional and what's truthful.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's kind of that sort of thing if someone tells you someone tells a writer a story. I'm just letting you guys know this right now. You told it to me. You can't untell it to me. It's probably going in my writer bank, and I might use it at some other time. So I think I think if you're doing something that's based on a real person, it was sort of about how I represented the film. It was very important to me to make clear that this is not my grandmother. She's a basis, and I think it's nice for people to go, it's cool. Your grandmother did, she did break her leg, and she had she had the splint and those aspects, and there's aspects of her character in it. But it isn't real. It's kind of like a flavor or something. And the weird thing about it is, like, a lot of people kind of come up and say she reminds me of my grandmother. People have that,
I had that same reaction, actually. I thought, gosh, she looks like my grandmother. Yeah, something about the women of that generation, and particularly the sort of elegant, accomplished ones. Yeah. And the universal truth.
And the calling it like it is, and not feeling like they have to be liked. It's kind of a thing. So I leaned into my grandmother, but leaned into lots of other sort of that archetype, I suppose.
Welby, was that a consideration for you? Did you feel that you needed to check in with anybody, or was there anybody you needed to consult with or even get consent from?
So my position with work that I make is that it's a contribution to a whole. It's not an authoritative story. It's not the only story about this thing. So it's the same with the documentary. You're working on one at the moment, and you go, it can only be a contribution to something bigger. And that, because sometimes you find yourself on the hook from your community going, but that's not my story. That's not my experience of it. And you go, your story is the one that you're going to tell someday. But this is a story, this is another story. And collectively, we tell a bigger story by the more people we encourage and the more people who are enabled to tell stories. So my position is that nothing I create is an authoritative text. Everything I create is my telling of, like a raranga, like a weaving of threads of different stories that comes into a new fabric. And identifiable in the fabric are little strands, little incidents, little pieces, including the actors. So, for instance, there are lines in Punch that the actors created. You know, Tim put an interpretation on Stan in that. So it's not just the script, it's the livingness of it as it's taking form, and then what threads you cut out when you are editing and working in post-production, what you enhance in sound, etc. I even have. Sorry, this is really interesting because we're the other way around. So I'm coming into documentary now, and I, you know, you'll be interviewing people and they've got two different versions of exactly the same thing, and you go, what the fuck? What am I supposed to do? And then you go, they're both telling the truth. They're both telling the truth, and what I'm doing is not telling your story or your story, but using storytelling to paint a picture of something that somebody else might paint a different way. And so that's why I think, so in the field of design, one of the things I hate is that designers are invisible from the process, so they're not responsible for what they do in many cases. You don't know who designed your yogurt pack, and you don't know who did that. But in film and visual arts, the thing I like is the director's name is there, and it's not just glory. You are held to account. You get held to account, you know, and I think that's the way it should be. But you can only be accountable for the fact that, for me, I can only be accountable for the fact that I made choices to tell a story as I know it, as an integration, as a weaving of things to create a new fabric. That's kind of...
And only some people think you should be shot. It goes too fast. We will come to questions, so if anyone's got burning questions out there, Jamie will come with the mic if you stick your hand up. Not quite now. But Welby, I'm glad you mentioned the actor and the process, because that was going to be the question I wanted to ask you guys now. No, great. Is that you have a text that you write, but then in all cases you have very prominent actors attached, and some probably quite headstrong. So we'll start with you, Welby. You'd mentioned briefly about what Tim Roth, you know, what a beloved of Tarantino, incredible body of work. How did that change things when you attached him as the father?
I don't like prima donnas, so I avoid them like the plague. And I always thought, oh shit, I hope he's not a prima donna. But he actually, for 98% of the time, he wasn't. He's just a wonderful, like low key, which was great. And I avoid casting anybody who will suck the oxygen out of other creatives. I just think they belong on their stage in their world, but not in a team where everyone's working at 300%. But the thing that I really thought about, so he was channeling his dad and his relationship with his dad. And one of the things I feel for actors when we say, draw on the stuff, and you go, what the fuck are you asking someone to do? That's a big ask. It's the same thing like when I find when I have autobiographical stuff in things, I get hurt when it's criticised because I have trouble separating the narrative from myself. And so when we tell autobiographical stories, there's also the duty of care to the self, and that isn't some marshmallow therapy thing. Like if you're going to tell the story and you don't think you're up to it, tell another story. But sometimes we don't realise what that will draw from us. So I know when, it took 15 years to get that film, 15 years, and there were days when I was digging compost into the garden and crying, because they'd turned the fucking thing down again and wanting it. Feedback was like trying to make it televisual, and you go, no, the poetics of something is the meat on it. It's not the frou-frou on the edge, it's the meat of it. So to pull that all back, I realise that I love actors who invest deeply, but I also realise I have a duty of care to them, and the film has a duty of care to them because they co-create part of the narrative. And Conan, who played the part of Whetu, hugely co-created that, even down to the point that he was working with Sarah Beale to design his costumes, which I love. I love that stuff because I think these things are co-creative processes, and they have to work. So I carry a responsibility to the people who put what is vulnerable into the film to give the film its resonance. And I don't ask permission for that. They don't have to do it. But I realise when you're on a roll and you're investing, the brakes aren't on. And in a way, I find that as a director, I had to be watching for that, to go, you sure? Like, I don't know, I don't really understand actors. I love working with them, but I don't understand how they can make everybody, the crew, almost on the edge of tears in a performance, and you go cut and they go, what? And you go, what the fuck just happened? So I don't have that skill, Some people do and some people don't. And then the intensity of a 6-week shoot, when you got people dealing with tough stuff, like a queer bashing, a rape, is a very fucking difficult thing for a man to deal with. That's a very tough thing. And so I found that part of my responsibility was to have an honest, high level of trust with an actor that was not put out on display for people to see. And it wasn't, are you all right? It was well beforehand going, what do you need to get there? And what do you need to come down?
And very interesting comment about the duty of care to self, because you are also being emotionally vulnerable in this process. Yeah. Matt, you cast the great, the mighty, the beloved Charlotte Rampling. And there you are, first-time feature director, and here she is, with this incredible career and having worked with some of the greats. What was that process like?
It was awesome. She's a amazing human, and she connected with the script. There was a bit of wooing involved, but where she sort of came on board was I showed her the script, and she was like, "No, I'm not coming to New Zealand, but nice script."
Oh, wow.
And then I said, okay, well, if you think it's nice, and my lovely producer, I've got to give Desiree a shout out for this. We were like, okay, I feel like there's a nibble. So we flew to Paris, and she gave me 3 days, and she was sussing me out. I've heard an interview where she talks later. I was like sussing him out, see if he's cool, or whatever. And I managed to not make too much of a fool of myself. But the thing was, like, she's just a human being who's obviously awesome, but she's an authentic human being who likes adventures, and, like, she wants to come and hang out with people in New Zealand. She wants to do things, and it's more about whether the experience is going to be creative and empowering for her. Mm-hmm. And she got a sense of that. And as she spoke, I was like, okay, I think she's going to make it better, and her thoughts were smart. And I suppose we just connected. And she did tell me she liked me one night, because one night I went out and had a few drinks and came back, and she was like, oh, I thought that was cool, or whatever it was, so she could see I was human. And, like, she says what she thinks and she doesn't suffer fools. And that's actually a real privilege, because you have to have your A game, and you have to, there's things you say, I agree, and then there's other things you have to go, look, I know you've been nominated for an Academy Award, but I think this is the right way to do it. So the good thing about that is it takes you out of your ego and makes it about the work and about the story. and I suppose that, and then also like as I was like, so I encouraged her to write, to almost be the writer of her character within reason in some ways. You know, we changed dialogue and we worked on things, and then and with that came a kind of groundedness. And I also watched every Charlotte Rampling film ever.
Wow.
You know, and so when you do that, you sort of go, I can't push her into here, but this is the territory that she owns. Do you know what I mean? And that territory is really that she's probably one of the most authentic people you'll ever meet, you know, and she plays characters, but she is herself, and she releases her inner truth, and she listens, and she goes the way, it's like she pushes the boat off. Not many actors do this. Some actors have a clear idea of where things going, but she pushes the boat off and goes down the rapids and lets it happen. And that means you get a lot of things that you didn't even realise you were getting until you get into the editing suite. Yeah.
And I was particularly struck by the really extraordinary performances from the young leads in both films, which I wondered whether was also the mark of a great actor who's willing to mentor, generously support a younger actor.
She was awesome. George was a great find. If you talk about having... she loved him. We showed him his audition tapes, and then we tried to get them to build a connection. You know, he wrote her a handwritten letter, and she wrote a handwritten letter back to him, and she mentored him. She would say, like, no, you don't need to, you know, just listen to me. She would do things like that in a very nice kind of a way, and he had enough, the sort of mixture of confidence and vulnerability that allowed that process to happen. And he was also, you know, he has his own personal experience with grief, and he wasn't afraid to, we worked on that in an ethical way. Wasn't afraid to bring that up, and it was there. You know, it's good. It's good casting from Miranda Rivers there as well, or helping us find the right person. Yeah.
And Welby, you said that Tim Roth is still working with your lead.
Yeah, so Jordan's actually over there with Tim at the moment in the
Wow.
US. So Tim introduced him to his agent and got both he and Conan hooked up with his agent. And
Wow.
Tim just became his dad in the film. I mean, I was trying to go, where the fuck does my movie end and I start, you know? But you could see as actors they were doing something, but they actually liked each other. And that's something I respect about him, and I respect also about Jordan and Conan, is that they understand that, you know, they weren't sucking oxygen from anybody. And you know, I always think, I don't know about you, but I always think a production, the end product, should be underpinned by a great process. You know, and it's hard work, and you're asking hard things from people. You know, we were snatching that from the jaws of COVID. I mean, it was we were going to be in a kaka if there was an outbreak. And yet in adversity, sometimes I think you get the brightest light. And that also had to do with relationships. So those guys were not working on it, meaning here's me doing my investment. They were just going, you know, at a night shoot at 3 a.m, and everyone's flagged, and you suddenly have to be 300% up. Tim used to say to Jordan just before he started, "Don't you fuck this up," you know. And it just broke the atmosphere wonderfully. And that now has become their catchphrase, even before they go online to, you know, because when it gets released, they've got to do all these interview stuff. And apparently just before the thing starts, Tim says, "Don't fuck this up." So, and that's great. So, yeah, I really resonated with what you were saying. That was so, I think, must be a thing with good culture.
Yeah, and I think you can feel that on the screen. You know, it shines through. Paula, you had 3 actors playing one role.
We actually had 5.
Oh.
It was actually 5 Finners, if you watched it carefully.
Really?
Yeah, it was baby Finna, newborn.
Ah, right.
And then little girl Finna in the flashback, and then Te Ori Ori,
right.
and then Miriama, and then Rena.
Wow. And then everyone's looking at it going, oh, do they look alike? Do they sound
Yeah.
alike? I mean, what were your considerations with that?
Well, Rena was on right from the beginning because there was, you know, the producers didn't think there was anyone else that could play her. And Whina actually had the hardest job because people knew Whina, her physicality. There was video footage of Whina. So Whina really had to dig in, and she has said that it's the hardest role. Not even Beth Heke is as hard as Whina was for her. But so Miriama, and there was also the fear of playing somebody like Whina. Yeah. And so Miriama, first of all, she was very reluctant. And so she had a relationship with James Napier Robertson, who I co-wrote and co-directed this with. And then we went to meet her, and I just said, look, we have a responsibility to make this real as we possibly can. It's a tribute to her to be able to play her. And Miriama was amazing. She was insane.
She was.
And Te Ori encapsulated who we thought young Whina would be. That was true. Her first protest was when she was 18, and we thought she nailed it. But yeah, and Whina did have the hardest job because we created middle Whina and baby Whina, but everybody could just go to YouTube and see Whina. And say, So Whina did an amazing job. But I think they may not have looked similar, Whina and Miriama, but the spirit sort of, it was kind of, because, if you know them and you just see them, there's no way they look alike. But I think the spirit and how they did their research and they embodied who Whina was. So that we felt, and people have said that the crossover was quite seamless, and because we sort of, we intercut the story. And the mannerisms and the way she spoke, and so ours is different because we have a person that we have to be like. You could either be completely not like them or exactly like them. There's kind of no middle ground. People would fall off, but so we tried really, really hard. All her clothes and like having her family around was helpful too, because Miriama went and spent time in Pangaru, and Whina is from up there, and Te Ori, they all spent time with the family. So it was really important that I do all my own research. So I researched everything and put it all on a drive for everybody to access, the art department, the makeup. Everybody had access to the research, so everybody knew the story that we were telling. The actresses, there's video recordings, the audio recordings of Whina that you have to put a hazmat suit on to go into the library to listen to it. So, you have to sign in and all the stuff you have to do. So Miriama and Whina went in and spent time just listening to her. But yeah, we were scared. Because I have said that if we got this wrong, we would have to leave the country. And so that's why all the care was taken to make sure that we didn't get it wrong.
Well, thankfully you pulled it off, and it did feel like one person. So really quite an astounding.
And the worlds
job.
too. It was important that the worlds were authentic. The freezing workers did all come out.
Yeah,
from Moerewa, and the po we carved a replica, and now the Coopers have it up north, the replica. Everything we tried to do exactly the same or as close to as we could. Her cloak was Whina's one, the one that Whina wore, the yellow feather one. We filmed in Waitangi, in the marae at Waitangi. So we tried really hard. To be as authentic as we could.
Wow. I saw the screening at Māoriland where a lot of people in that audience had been to the marches and, were part of that story. And they 100% embraced it. So if you can win the home crowd over, well done. So we're eating into pizza time, but I'm sure people out there have questions. Are you there, Jamie, with your microphone? And your hand is up. So,
kia ora, everybody. It's just an honour to be here with you guys to experience, and it's an honor for us to learn from you guys. I think my question would be, when you write a story and make a film about someone that is real, in terms of rights, where does the right goes to when you sort of promote it or sell it overseas? How do you negotiate with the family, because you sort of make a product and sell it, and where does the rights go to when you make a story about a real person?
That's a big one. The question is about rights when you are working with a real story. Probably not so much with your guys' stories, because that's original work and you would hold the copyright to that, but it's massive, isn't it, Paula?
Yeah, I think because I'm not the producer, so that stuff is all done, with the people that are got more skin in the game than me. But so I think they do. Of course, they pay a fee for time and what have you, but the rights, and a percentage of the film's takings. Well, not many films in New Zealand actually make any money. That's the long and short of it. But so basically, they have to sign off everything that we do, and they get the film. They can do whatever they want with it, but they get a percentage of the profits, which is So the rights do stay with the production company, but if they wanted to do anything with the film, it'll go into schools. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bottom line. You have a lawyer.
Yeah.
You have a life rights contract, an option and purchase, and you spend a lot of time negotiating that.
And it's all done before you even make the film.
Yeah, and it has to be all approved before you even get film financing. There's a thing called chain of title, which is who owns which bits of it, and you can't even get to, by the time you go over $80,000 at the Film Commission, you've got to show all those documents. So all of that has to be done up front. So, yeah, lawyers. It's all about lawyers.
Kia ora. I was wondering, when writing entirely fictional stories, or at least more fictionalized ones, often you depend on genre conventions and act structures to kind of have something to line up your events in reference with. But when writing about real events, you might have to deal with what actually happened. Have you found that those conventions or structures actually mesh well together? Was that a challenge for you? Is there any way that you found that you could build structure out of real events?
Structure. Were you thinking about a 3-act structure when you were writing the film, or a conventional structure, or were you just writing it?
That all came sort of in editing. Like, we wrote it, right? But the film just keeps getting made at every step of the way. But the 3-act structure for a life, maybe, I don't know. It wasn't something that we actually sat down and thought about. We thought about the milestones in her life and the things that created change or a change of direction. She died at the end and she was born, and we pretty much did what we wanted in the middle, as per the dramatic sort of ebbs and flows of what she did. But and you create, of course, the drama around the land march. We sort of just pepper potted it through to see a sort of progression of her, but it was also that showed her change as well, even though she was the same age in the land march. The situations that she had to deal with in the land march, we sort of went back to her real life as a younger person and showed that she was dealing with those at that time too. So,
the land march was almost like a spine that the narrative hung from.
Yeah,
I felt when I was watching it, it was like the through line.
Yeah,
the character arc, really, from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Were you thinking about structure, Welby?
So I don't use a 3-act structure. It's never felt comfortable to me. But I think of like a raranga, like a weaving. And so the film oscillated between two ideas, touch and punch. So it has the lightest, most delicate of touches and the most brutal, sudden punches. And it works between dark and light, dark and light, dark and light. And then within that, so I don't write scripts to start off with. I draw my whole film, hundreds and hundreds of drawings, and I pin them on the wall, and I move them around, and I write notes with them to find, because I'm quite a visual thinker. I always think that I love the fact that films are called the pictures, going to the pictures. And so I think it is a visual medium. I don't think of it as a written form. So I have to, the bugger I face is having to translate things into treatments or into screenplays, because that's not, I imagine, like most of my films don't have a lot of dialogue in it. And if I do everything I can to rip dialogue out. So we watch things, you know. So in terms of another thing that as I said, I don't have TV and I don't have radio, and I don't watch many movies, and especially if I'm creating something, because I'm terrified I'm going to get influenced, because I just suspend all disbelief when I go into a movie and get munted by them, you know. But I love a movie that does that, but I'm afraid that it will influence me. So this may or may not answer your question. So I don't create a 3-act structure. I go, this is a story to be told, and I have to avoid getting troughs in it, slumps in it. And so I identify where are the pieces that will lift our spirit up and where are the pieces that will betray us, and how do we get from a point where we don't like these characters to that we love all of them. And I just see it as threads that weave through.
Love that idea. Matt, what about you? Are you thinking about structure
I'm
when you're
a
writing?
structure... I was going to say I'm a structure slut, so forgive me. But I mean, I do think there's an innate structure. I mean, it is important to me, but it can't supersede character. And the issue with structure is that, you know, you can't... I mean, I do feel like we know that if you go to a film, there's going to be a beginning, middle, and end. And at the beginning, you're probably going to get to know the characters, and in the middle, they're going to go through the thing, and then at some point, it's going to get harder, and then they're going to figure out, or not figure out, how to get over it. And that, to me, is interesting, and it's also, to be honest, I get so hunkered down on it at times that it becomes creatively stifling. So I actually wish I was more like you, Welby. But then I sort of feel like it's there, so you know it's there. So how do you make things happen so they don't feel like, oh, it's the second act, it's that, because I want to go to a film, and I do want to go on for me, I want to go on a journey, and I want to go, who are these people? And then I want to feel things, and structure is just a tool that to help you. You know that other films have been like this in the past, and it's there. But then, obviously, some of my favourite films, I can't see that. You know, like I was watching Licorice Pizza the other day, and it does have a structure, but I love it. It does have a structure, but it sort of wobbles around a bit as well, and I kind of like that. So I think that there's a delicate balance between structure and character, and also the human heart, which is what you're talking about, I think, and it's the trick is to try to do it so we don't see it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Structure slut. You heard it here. Structure slut.
Yeah. I was like, I didn't want to say it, but I couldn't think of anything else to say. All right.
Love it. Anybody else?
For your events too, that everyone experiences those events in different ways. Like, so you can't tell the story of an event. It has to be from someone's perspective. So, and it's all about relationships to or of. So that's, you know, when you're talking about structure, well, around a certain event. So that's kind of...
I like that movie Sorry, the movie In Education. Has anyone seen that movie? I really love it. And the cool thing about it is they've taken like a life, and they've taken like one chapter of a book or something like that and told this kind of coming of age story. And I think like that's a choice. You're gonna do. You could go in, or you could go big, and it depends on. I suppose it depends on the story or what you're trying to say to people.
You really got them going there, Pulkit, with this structure talk.
I'm just going to hold it.
Did I see somebody with a hand up over here? Yeah. Oh, you got the microphone. Okay, go.
It's off. That's okay. I'll
just shout.
Yeah. In terms of like the process of like getting that script to the screen, like what's like one of the first like most important things to getting that ball rolling, like to getting it onto that screen?
Write it.
That's so true.
Yeah.
And what's the important part of getting that?
You mean after the script?
Yeah.
Find a producer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we're all in the same boat. There's nothing that I haven't got that's under 10 years old. Nothing. Like, here's some of the young ones going, I've had this script for like 9 months and no one's oh, try 10 years. But it's that belief in yourself and your story. You're going to hang on to it and like listen to people that know what they're talking about and cherry pick what you want and what you don't want. But just keep going. If you have that story that you want to tell, you find a producer.
I'd add to that a brave producer. Like I'm working with someone at the moment who's like that, and we'll see things differently. But I love her dearly because she'll have the courage to go into the places I didn't think of. The only reason we got Tim Roth was that the producer sent it over to his agent. I didn't know who Tim Roth was. I didn't know who he was. Shame.
I love it.
But here's a guy who doesn't watch stuff, so but they could see the potential. So having a producer who shares the vision, but has these skills beyond your own to know where to pitch things, who to shoulder tap, because I'm no good at that stuff. I'm no good. I'm the shy guy in the corner of the room looking for the exit as soon as anyone has to do the business stuff. And so I think, and I had huge trouble finding a producer, huge trouble. And and now I can see there are some kinds of producers who, if you share the vision, which means I think it's my responsibility to be really clear about the vision and also really clear about the skills I bring and the gaps I have, so that relationship is a really solid and understanding one. And then, I know it sounds strange because I fight with producers, but to look after them when they're going and doing the things that I wouldn't be able to do. So to say thank you, because there are going to be times when you're going to be going at each other. So I have immense respect for creative, adventurous producers.
Yeah,
you never went to Des, did you, Matt? Did you?
I would never say it. I think, though, that if you can find a producer that has a filmmaker's heart, and I think there's a difference, because at some point, the film commission or whoever it is, someone is going to say no, and you want to be buddied up with someone who's prepared to say, well, I hear that you said no, but actually you're wrong, and we're going to keep going. Absolutely. And it kind of is just a test of character at some point, and I was lucky enough to find Angela and Des, who are like that.
And talk. Like, I don't understand why people are like, I've got the script, but what's it about? Oh, I can't really tell you because I'm like, well, like no one's going to have, you might have an idea, but everyone's got ideas and everyone's got maybe, the same idea as you. But the only way you're going to find people that are in your camp is to talk and to find people that have the same sort of the way of thinking as you and the same energy as you and want the same from you that you want from them. So share. I just don't understand, like my shit's everywhere. I've got stuff everywhere. Like, I've got stories, I've got treatments, just everywhere, because only I can tell that story in the way that I can tell that story. Like, if you want to rip it off, sweet, do it, whatever. I've got heaps more. Doesn't matter. To me, it doesn't matter. If people have to steal your stuff, they're not going to get very far. So share, get with like-minded people, come to these things, Share your stuff, share your stories. You don't know who's sitting next to you that might have something they can add to your project. Like, seriously, I've got stuff. I'm like, oh, do you want to read my stuff? Some people are like, 99% won't, but there's just one that might. And but be prepared for it all to land at the same time. And then you're just so busy you haven't even got time. But share your stuff. We all, and support each other. That's another really, 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 you can't do this alone. No one can make a film on your own. You asked about ownership of stuff. If you want to tell a story, you get someone that, you either tell it yourself, but people are going to fund it. So they obviously want you to tell the story as well. So, and they, you want to work with people that you can hang out with. Probably the biggest thing.
Great advice. I think Jamie's lurking, going, just wrap, hurry up. So thank you for an amazing talk and for your wisdom.
This podcast is brought to you thanks to generous support from the New Zealand Film Commission, Foundation North, White Studios, and Images and Sound. The voiceover was recorded by Jamie Irvine and music is by Podington Bear. You can read more about these speakers at our website, www.scriptoscreen.co.nz.